start the conference.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Bharamati. It gives me great pleasure to be in this conference of competitive warehousing competitiveness, and very aptly so, and timing-wise as well. It's a very good thing, and we have a very august panel today with whom we'll be discussing the latest trends in warehousing and how this makes it very important. And we will take all the inputs from service providers or operators, as well as from users across various segments. And we have a very large representation from the consulting firm EY. So you'll get a very wide spectrum of how warehousing competitiveness is important and how do we go about building it. And very much so in this particular session, we are going to depend more on what are we going to do with outsourcing, how are the operating business models emerging, how is technology enabling, etc. But before I get on to introducing my panel and also taking them through this discussion, I wanted to quickly highlight a few points. Warehousing has taken a lot of importance in the last 10 years and more so in the last 5 years in India. A couple of enablers have made it happen. Of course, there are these regulatory enablers like definitely GST. That was a big game changer from India moving from having points of storage entirely dependent on a stack structure to point of storage really meaning how to serve a market and how to kind of where to produce, where to store, and how to serve the end consumers. So that was a big regulatory shift that changed the whole game of warehousing. The thrust on Made in India, also by the Honorable Prime Minister, has been a big shift because of which the warehousing has become more relevant today than what it was in the past. E-commerce has played another significant role in the way people consume and the way in which the consumption points have to be delivered. Organized retail has changed the needs of warehousing quite significantly. But most importantly, in the last 1.5 to 2 years, the pandemic has also changed the way people work, the way supply chain has got its own importance, and the way the focus on supply chain, the focus on ensuring the supply chain lines are always there and planning for any contingencies are also made this a very important aspect of what it is in the entire game of supply chain. Another enablers in this has been the technology. Technology has been a real game changer, whether it is simple IT, IoT devices, artificial intelligence, robotics, or the big data that is coming, and the cloud architecture has made it easily scalable for anyone, and we are able to reach across to everyone. And the ability to gather this much of data is making supply chain more efficient, more lean, and also the time to serve the market and the quality of service is also changing. As a macroeconomic indicators, some of the things that are happening are the rise of e-commerce, rise of aspiration levels in tier 2, tier 3 cities has also made this game beyond the top 50, 60 cities in India as far as normal consumption goods are concerned. So a wide range of enablers have made warehousing more important than what it was in the past. And the pandemic has definitely added to its own. It's added a lot of problems. It's given a lot of opportunities. And here it is definitely going to help us in what it is. So at the very right conference, right team, right and appropriate time. And we have an excellent set of panelists today along with me who are definitely going to be discussing these points as we go by. And at the end of this session, we will open up for question and answers for the audience as well, because definitely we have a wealth of information that can be shared for all of us to learn. And at the end of the day, I'm sure that all of us will be enriched than what we were at the beginning of the conference. So let me first introduce the panelists, and then I'll go around asking for a few of their comments from my co-panelists. First on the panelist, we have Rahul. Rahul is the Senior Director of Justpree International. He's a supply chain executive with 22 years of progressive experience in global supply chain management in the US, Asia, China, and India. Rahul has worked in Fortune 500 companies like Microsoft, Siemens, SanDisk, to high growth technology startups like Equinus, and in the last 3.5 years in global fresh produce company like Just Free International. 14 of those years have been in leadership and management roles. Rahul's expertise is in taking over underperforming supply chains and enabling significant performance improvements through process excellence, digitization, and by building high performance teams. He thrives in high performance, high pressure environments and where substantial cross-functional change initiatives are required. Rahul has worked in nearly every component of supply chain and manufacturing strategy, supply chain sourcing, material planning, operations planning, supply chain operations, fulfillment and logistics, leading cross-functional, regional and global teams. Rahul currently heads the supply chain for Greater China region for Just Free International, the fastest growing and one of the most challenging markets for Just Free. Welcome to you, Rahul. Next on the panel, we have Satyam Sundaram. He's a partner with Ernst & Young, EY. He heads the social sector, government and transaction advisory services. Under the social sector, he had the fortune of working in healthcare, education, and agricultural transaction studies in government space for nearly a decade now. His specialities include strong qualitative and quantitative research methods, PPP, which is public-private partnerships, social sector transactions, financial analysis, public policy, law, and analytics. Welcome, Sundaram. Satyam. Sorry. Next, we have Vaibhav Verma. He is the head of supply chain for Apollo Tires. He is a professional with 22 years of experience with leading companies in areas of planning, operation, warehousing, and transportation. Diverse experience of corporate, plant, and field operations in the field of supply chain domain. Stable and progressive career growth with consistent proven track record in all areas of operation. An empathizing and motivational leader with an eye for detail and innovative ideas, keeping the big picture of service, quality, cost, brand equity, and organizational growth in the first place. Welcome, Vaibhav. I'm sure we'll have a lot of interaction and gain from your knowledge. I then have Nikhil Kush as a co-panelist. He heads supply chain for Sakata International India Limited, an engineer, MBA, CIPM, and a Six Sigma by qualification, a black belt, having more than 25 years of experience in various end-to-end supply chain leadership roles across a wide range of industries and sectors, worked in diverse organizations like DuPont, Ford, Alcargo, and PAC, which is a global NGO, driven by passion to continuously improve and innovate processes for maximizing sustainable benefits to various stakeholders across the supply chain. Presently working as supply chain head for Takata in India and in Bangladesh. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
Then we have Jeffrey Tan, who's joined us from Singapore. He's the head of group corporate development of the YCH Group. He currently heads the network and connectivity and corporate development at YCH Group. Jeffrey Tan is a business and technology expert in driving logistics innovation globally. With more than 15 years of international experience across maritime industry sectors, he has a proven track record of leveraging technology to drive business innovation in organizations like PSA Corporation, IDA International, Ascenda Simbridge, Crimson Logic, and Y3 Technologies. Jeffrey has spearheaded major projects in smart ports, smart cities, supply chain management, logistics across China, Asia, Middle East, and Latin America. He is currently the president of Supply Chain Management Chapter at Singapore Computer Society. Welcome to you, Dan, and glad that you are able to join from Singapore. So very good panel, exciting 1 hour that we have. I'm sure all of us will benefit by this. So before I start, let me first go on to Rahul. Rahul, you come from Just Free International, and for those of people who don't know, you're the largest kiwi supplier to India, and all of us consume that fruit. And maybe you could tell us about the entire supply chain, the cold chain supply chain, how it is evolving in India. Because one of the areas in India has been at least that, agricultural produce gets a lot wasted. Our agricultural supply chains are not that proper for us to, from farm to fork, if I were to call it, there is a lot of wastage that happens. And that's one of the key tasks that Government of India, along with CIA and other organizations, are working towards, seeing that how we are able to improve this. And in specifically in this supply chain, what role do you think the warehousing, especially the cold chain warehousing, will help? And please share us your knowledge of the global practices and how it is getting into India, and how your organization and other organizations at large are able to take this forward. Over to you, Rahul.
Thank you, Shankar. Am I audible to everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Zespri is a New Zealand-based organization. It's almost like an Anand model, right? Where it's a grower-owned company managing the marketing and logistics. We almost manage 500,000 tons of produce, exporting to about 53 countries, which is close to almost 50,000 TEUs. From a scale perspective, that actually gives it that advantage to go deeper in terms of the infrastructure that is required. I think just one quick data point is the fresh produce losses that we see as an industry are around 1.3 to 1.7% annually, which is, compared to India, is almost 40%. So there is a significant gap or value that you can see by focusing on the warehousing. There are few things that I think are important in terms of what can be leveraged, as we develop the infrastructure in India. I think there's a good focus that I see, especially in the markets like Japan and Korea, where you have what they call port warehouses, right? Where when we ship our charters, to the port in Tokyo, we don't even need a trucking. So it is unloaded right from the charter and it goes into the warehouse. So that entire ecosystem is helped by obviously the government, the port authorities, the companies like Zespri, which have that scale, and they came together and created that model. So obviously that model is efficient because the fruit doesn't have to stay out for more than 4 hours, saving obviously a lot in terms of cooling the fruit down. So it is an energy efficient model. It is obviously a cost effective model. And the third important thing is the speed, right? So we are talking about a charter which is 5,000 tons, which get discharged in a matter of 36 hours. So that's one significant model that can be explored, for the right scale. I think second learning that we had that over so many years, they have figured out the right seasonal mix of categories for the cold chain warehouse, which allows them to increase the utilization throughout the year, right? So if my kiwi fruit peaks out between April and October, and if I have like a 12-month fruit like banana, right? So the right mix of categories allows you to increase the utilization for the investment. I think third learning, which is now emerging, especially I'm based out of Shanghai, and there's a lot of almost 20% growth expected in the cold chain warehousing. The average size of the room has changed significantly. Although the overall size of the warehouse remain anywhere between 50,000 square meters to 100,000 square meters for the big player, but the average room size has dropped to almost like 1,000 pallets or 2,000 pallets. And the reason being, again, as I'm managing different categories, I have to, in a way, control the environment in line with the product that I'm handling. And those small rooms allows us to manage the fruit, in a much better way, obviously, than reducing the wastage, from warehouse. And I think the last one I would say is the value-added services in cold chain, which is not in a traditional ambient warehousing space, but services like ripening. I think this is one of the key learnings from my last 3 years, especially in the markets like Japan, where convenience is sought by the consumer and people are willing to pay the premium to experience that convenience. And what does convenience mean? When you are, people obviously want to eat more fresh fruits, juices. Um, we are able to focus the demand, what we call the micro warehouses, right? Where the food is offered, a cut produced, like what we call. The food is cut to the demand, and the demand has to be projected, on almost at a daily level, right? And you serve them a cut fruit, especially for some of the fruit, it's not so easy to eat. And again, that has a backup of the micro warehouses closer to the city offices, which help you serve that demand. I think that's like few models that I have seen emerging, which obviously, as we build our scale, will be helpful for us to consider. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. Very nice. You really spoke about how from a wastage level of 40% to how you're operating in an environment where it's just 1.5, 1.6%. That's awesome for us if we can do that in India, and the kind of value that it will release and the kind of money that's just getting drained, and this will also help in the overall logistics cost coming down as a percentage of GDP. That's one of the tasks that as a government has taken, from bringing down from 13-14% to less than 10%. These are measures that will definitely help. You spoke about how the seasonal mix is happening, and very interesting concept of micro warehousing, which is leading to value added service to the consumer. And obviously consumer needs many different types of how even a simple thing like a fruit is given to him. And very interesting point. I'll come back to you later for a couple of more questions. But on the subject of agri and warehousing, let me now move on to Satyam. Satyam, you are working with the government, very interesting profile you've been doing. Can you speak about what specific initiatives the government is taking in terms of warehousing, especially for agricultural commodities across India, and how we are working towards reducing this so-called waste that's not benefiting anyone? So over to you, Satyam. You're on mute, Satyam. Can you unmute yourself?
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are audible. You could possibly use the presentation mode.
And the screen is visible?
Presentation mode. If you can take it to presentation mode, it will be great. Thank you.
Yeah, so let me start by complimenting what Rahul said a few seconds back in terms of ripening chambers and all. Some of the numbers that I wanted to put across before I get into the specific questions that you asked. I think if we look at, when we say logistics industry, there are three components to it that we are looking at: transportation, storage, and value-added services. Particularly in the agriculture sector, what is important is while storage is around 15% in most of the other areas, and transportation and other services are around 85%. Here, as Rahul was also talking about, storage has to be combined with a lot on the value-added service, particularly when we are looking at on the horticulture side. And this becomes as a much larger combined part of it. In terms of share, where storage itself, if we look at, agriculture is around 15 to 20%, including the cold storage as we see today. There is huge amount of gap, and that's what Rahul was alluding when he said, the wastages that we have, particularly on the fruits and vegetable side, where pack houses, reefer transport, ripening chambers, and cold storage is something that we need to really work on, and that's what the government is also trying to focus. And of course, warehousing also, there is a gap. Now, at the aggregate level, some of these gaps may be lesser, but the larger part is even at the disaggregate level, particularly on the cold storage side, is far more, as I'll talk about, as I go into the presentation. Second side, if you look at the difference that agri logistics has from the larger other logistics is, while logistics is largely unorganized in the agriculture sector for various reasons, including food security, it is largely dominated by the government, both in terms of regulation and in terms of utilization. For example, if we just look at one of the prominent players like FCI, while it just may have 555 assets owned, it actually uses around 2000. So two-thirds of the private sector assets also is something that it hires, and therefore becomes a dominant player as compared to the other logistics areas. What I was also talking about is in terms of regional distribution, in terms of the own warehouses. If we look at on the grain side and this warehouses side, we will find that both FCI and CWC have fairly distributed infrastructure across the country. And therefore, to that extent, while demand supply mismatch may be there, at least there is a decent amount of distribution that you would see with 545 owned warehouses at FCI and 422 owned warehouses at CWC, combining around 200 plus 225 plus lakh metric tons of capacity with an average utilization of 84 to 86%. If you go on to the cold storage side, and that's where you will see that while these are owned by private operators, the distribution is also pretty skewed across the country, and largely the 370 lakh metric ton capacity that we have is distributed in 8 states that we see here, both in terms of number and in terms of size. And therefore, that also to a large extent leads to a lot of wastage that we were talking about in the food and grain sector. What will also be important as we grow, as we go into the future, and as we see, what you see on the left side is the kind of food patterns which have been emerged over a period of time. And we are somewhere in the second leg, just above Africa, in terms of our current market, where we are looking at mass market and convenience snacking. As we move further and further up in the value chain, we will be moving towards more and more high technology, high quality hygiene and diet food and organic food, more moving into the European and North American kind of consumption pattern. And as we move in that pattern, our requirement for processed food and therefore value addition, both at the storage level and later on even in the industry side, will change. And the kind of logistics infrastructure which will be required as we move in this value chain will also change a lot. And I think to that extent, the government's policies also need to take this into account as these things change. In terms of central support, coming to the specific questions that we were talking about, today the government is supporting through various schemes that it has, one of them being under the Government of India Mission for Integrated Development of Horticulture, where for post-harvest infrastructure, including cold storages, they are supporting up to 35 to 50% grant. Similarly, under National Horticulture Board, there is a support for 35 to 50%, depending on whether it's the regional area or are we looking at the northeast capacity, in the northeast being around 50% and the region 50%. There's also a discussion, and the government announced in this year that they are looking at geotagging of warehouses as per WTRA norms, and as well as quality improvement, because while the numbers might be there, the question is also around the quality, particularly in the agriculture side. We have had also schemes which have been running and supporting village storage schemes, more on viability gap funding, closer to the micro warehousing concept. However, we haven't been able to achieve the kind of technology and efficiency that we should have using this scheme. So that's another area where there is funding available, and that needs private sector innovations to come in at the farm gate level in terms of creating those micro infrastructure. Of course, there are Mudra loans, and the latest of it is the Agriculture Infrastructure Fund, which was announced as a part of the COVID relief, is also now available to private sector, mandis, FPOs, and other entities, MSMEs particularly, who would be interested in setting up some of these infrastructure, whether it's storage or transportation infrastructure related to the agri commodities. And that is another Government of India initiative which could be looked at. Under food processing, as I was saying, there is also something called PM Kisan, where as a part of Kisan Sampada Yojana, there are at least 5 such schemes that exist, which are supporting development of cold chain infrastructure, development of backward forward linkages, larger development of food parks, mega food parks, and things like that, where the funding is between 35 to 50%, and the upper limit being between 5 to 10 crores, and in mega food parks up to 50 crores of funding is available. And the idea there is again to get the private sector entrepreneurs to be able to participate and create the missing infrastructure link that we have. The idea has to be now picked up and further reinforced with the ecosystem around, so that overall things come up in terms of, it's not only about the warehousing or the support system. Everyone also needs to look at the processing, the packaging, and other things. There are also state governments, and I'm just taking one example of the state government, where under the crop cluster development program, government of Haryana is providing support up to 90% in some cases on creation of pack houses, cold rooms, reefer vans, and in some cases 70% in terms of whether it's about processing or packaging and things like that. So, overall across the ecosystem, there are facilities, there are thought processes which are going at the government level in terms of trying to support the question that you are asking in terms of what are those limitations. And as you would see, we have had increase in the capacity at a rapid rate after 1990, once this certain schemes started, and in the last few years, the scheme has further enhanced the capacity at a much faster rate. So with that, let me take a pause, and once you come back, we'll discuss later on the others.
Thank you very much, Satyam, for talking to us about the government role in the agricultural supply chain, in the kind of warehousing capacity created by either the Food Corporation India or the central warehousing, the schemes that are available both at the central government level and at various state government levels. And I think it's interesting time for public partnership and private partnership in this area. And I'll come to you more, but now let me move on to a totally different industry, different part of the overall warehousing that we are talking about.
Can you guys hear Shankar? Or okay.
No, I think we lost him probably.
Sorry,
I think the connection has got disrupted.
The force freeze, frozen. We're talking about cold chain.
Sorry, I had some connectivity issue. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yes, you are audible now.
Okay, I had some issues. I was talking and I thought I was talking. Vibhav, you're there on the call, right? Okay. We moved to an entirely different segment now, and he's part of Apollo Tires. And let me ask him about in the manufacturing industry, especially in industry that you represent right now, tires. How does the whole supply chain and logistics and your working with 3PLs come about? And what do you do in terms of from the manufacturing center to reach it to your ultimate point of consumption? Obviously, you'll have two sets of customers. One are the OEMs to whom you will supply, and the other one you will supply is to a trade for replacement market. So can you tell us the nuances of what is involved in this supply chain and what are the challenges that you see, especially with respect to warehousing and how things are emerging, and a little bit on how technology is being adopted, which makes your entire service to your customers more efficient and the quality of service improves. And with the integration of the back end, how are you able to plan your supply chain? So some thoughts on that, Vibhav.
Thank you, Mr. Shankar. All panelists, delegates, thank you for giving me a chance to speak on this. So Tires, as you know, is actually a voluminous product, and the channels involved here definitely, apart from the export and the domestic, we have the replacement channel and then the OEM channel. And when we talk of the outbound supply chain within tires, the building blocks that we talk of are basically the transportation, the warehousing, and definitely the service providers. Now, if we look into the overall logistics of tires, the location thing is something which is having the prominent in this industry. So for example, if I talk of putting up my network, I will look into how are the warehouses placed. So am I near to the OEM in terms of supply? Am I near to the customers in terms of supply? And things being voluminous, it means that the productivity and the speed of execution is also something which is very, very important. So if you look into the network, you will find, so you will have a primary channel, and then you will have a secondary channel, and then you will have a tertiary channel. So from primary, when you move to the secondary, in between, you will have a strong and big warehouse, which basically will serve to a region. And then when you go to the last channel, that is where the rest, the last mile is, that is where you will have the smaller warehouse within the cities. Now, in the tire industry, we in the last few years actually have done a lot of transformation in terms of our supply chain. So the inaugural session, which we were talking of, speaking of go downs. So this was one term, if you remember last, I think maybe 15, 20 years, go down was a prominent word used for warehouse. And I remember in the last 10 years, this is something which we wanted to get off. And in fact, in all forums, not just in supply chain, in all forums, we were the ones who were talking of now you don't have to go down for something. You have to go up, actually. At least 4 plinth height, 4 foot plinth height is the up you have to go. And then definitely 20 feet, 30 feet, everything is possible. So there is nothing known as go down. So that is the transformation that we started. And then we converted all our warehouses from go downs to actual real warehouses. But the challenges that we were speaking of earlier was that finding the right go down at the right place with the right specs suiting to your industry is always a challenge. So I remember even cases where I've been into grade A logistics parks, but as far as the warehouse was concerned, it was perfect. But when we look into the productivity that you'll be able to get out of there, that was missing. So even the grade A warehouses had certain lacunas because of which it was not fitting the industry. Now when we move out and we really want to get out of this go down thing and move into the warehouse thing, what do we do? So if something is not fitting into your requirement, the only way the road left out is to get things done your way. So that is where you go in for BTSs. So we did a lot of BTSs, created lakhs of square feet of space, pan India, I would say. And definitely, as everyone would agree, it's easy to get warehouses in bigger cities. So you will get a warehouse easily in Bangalore, you will get something in NCR. But you talk of something, say, for example, of cities like Kanpur, you talk of something of cities like, say, Cuttack, it's extremely difficult. So the only way left out for you to is what? You approach the local builders and you look out for warehouses and get it constructed. So that is how the industry is actually coping with the requirement of the warehouses. And that is where the biggest gap is that we find. So on one hand, we have the grade A warehouses, which are too good. And on the other hand, we have the places where we just don't have warehouses and you just fight for the space, get something constructed. You look for a grade A kind of a thing. Maybe you construct a grade B, and over a 5 years time, it converts into a grade C or a grade D thing because you don't have a professional developer out here. So this we see as the biggest challenge in warehousing. And that is where the collaboration part, which we were discussing in the inaugural address, comes in. So the more educated will have to teach the less educated. So the bigger players in the warehousing have to come forward, speak up to these smaller players, collaborate with them, and maybe create warehousing space in cities which are kind of B and C grade cities, so that manufacturers actually can get access of warehouses which are quality warehouses to some extent. So this is one piece of thing which is actually missing. Apart from the warehousing thing, definitely things are not possible to be done professionally until unless you have real good players who can assist you in operation. That is where the 3PLs come in. And in the last few years, we see that we have outsourced almost everything, I would say. So as far as all the primary to secondary part is concerned, everything is outsourced. And that is the reason that we have been able to focus on the core area. So sitting in the office, we can focus on important things rather than thinking of operation, where the delivery is happening or not. So this is another area where a lot has happened. And thanks to the 3PLs, the pandemic period was something which was very difficult. And I think that everybody would agree that had there been no 3PLs, it would have been really, really very difficult for companies to handle the operations during the pandemic period. So these logistics people were actually the Superman in the last more than 1 year, actually. So 3PL is another thing that has happened, and definitely there's a lot of evolution that is coming in the 3PL. But again, when we get into the 3PL area, the same gap exists that we see in the warehousing area. So again, what you have is the 20-80% rule or the 90-10% rule. So you have 10% being ruled by the biggies, but the 90% is something which is probably left out. And then within the 90% also, you will have a lot of segregation. So you from B to C to D to D, you have all kind of players that will fall part in this 80 to 90% kind of a feature. Now, so while all this has happened, so outsourcing has happened, this warehouse from go down to warehouse has happened, but how the future pans out and what do we look forward in the future is something which is more important. So while we have done a lot in terms of warehousing ourselves, it is not so that manufacturing companies will be able to do themselves everything. So we would be looking forward to a lot of collaboration basically between the bigger and the smaller players so that we get good warehouses in smaller cities. The second thing being on the 3PL side, while there are players, there are good players, but again, the more educated will have to teach the less educated. So again, there has to be a collaboration between the biggies and the smaller players so as to come out with services which are actually the kind of requirement that the Indian manufacturing industry actually needs. So while we talk of 3PL today, we talk of operations, but there is lesser talk of productivity. There is lesser talk of how to bring down the cost. So these are the things which will have to start coming up basically if we look into. So this is how the whole industry backs out. But the final thing that I would like to mention is that in the entire manufacturing industry, you will see that the last mile is actually the most important thing. So you might be having a 1 million square feet mother warehouse kind of a network, but at the same time, that is the kind of network that you will need as in-city warehouses to service the final customers. Now that is where the biggest gap is. So the last mile, especially the in-city warehouse, is something which needs a lot of focus, because I would say as of today, that is the biggest challenge. It's a real challenge, and if you see into into the supply chain of any manufacturing industry, you will find that you will create a state-of-art structure in your plant. As you move out into the mother warehouse kind of a structure, you will see that you will have A grade, B grade, C grade, all kind of grade depending upon what you get anywhere. And then when you move out into the city warehouses, you will find, I don't know how to define the grade even there. So we cannot have a supply chain actually which is too good at the top, but as you go down, the quality goes down. But when the quality goes down, that is where a customer is. So your customer is where your quality is the least. So that is the biggest challenge that I see, which is basically the in-city warehouses and the last mile connectivity. So this is just a sum up of our problems, what we have done kind of, and what is the kind of future we see in terms of collaboration between smaller and bigger players, both in warehousing and in the 3PLs. Last point which you wanted to ask was on technology. So certainly, so this is the thing for future. A lot is happening in supply chain. In fact, whenever there is a discussion on supply chain, technology takes the maximum discussion now these days. So you have everything. So all cloud, all monitoring, all tracking, everything is possible. And that is where you see a lot of technology being applied, and all these new age companies that you have, especially in the Indian logistics market, they are the ones who are actually applying this technology bit the maximum. From the manufacturing side, from our company side, we too have done a lot. So if you remember 15, 20 years back, if you dispatch a truck, there was no possibility of knowing where the truck is. That is no more today. So you have GPS, you have SIM tracking, everything. All that is, I think, has become a hygiene factor now for the supply chain professionals for any manufacturing company. So all that is in place. Then you have the transportation modules, because this is something without which you definitely cannot survive. I think, again, this is a hygiene factor, and all implemented everywhere in our case also. So going forward, the important thing to handle will be that if you look into the tire industry, you will have a lot of SKUs. And at the same time, you will see that the size of the car is also increasing, which means the size of the tire will also increase. So if you sell the same number of tires also, even the storage space required for you will be more, because the tire is now a little bigger. So even if there is the same volume, the storage space required now is more. Handling required now is better, which actually means that the overall space requirement going ahead along with the growth is going to increase only. So this is one important thing. And along with it, the productivity, the cost, and the technology bit, how much more of technology can get into warehouse, because a warehouse cannot expand all the time horizontally. Sometime it has to go vertical, and how much of vertical we don't know. And to tell you, the complexity of SKUs is very high. So you have 500, 600 SKUs with one truck going with 40 to 50 kind of SKUs, and you're sending 25 to 30 trucks from one location in one day, and having a vertical warehouse is really a challenge. So that is one thing which we look forward to in future on how to do it better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. A very nice way of putting across the challenges in your industry. And 2 or 3 points that you spoke about made a lot of meaningful sense. And that's something which we should pick it up as we go by for further discussion as well. One of them is that, you said that we have moved away from this go down culture. 2 words in Indian industry, one is go down and another is C&F agents. Both these are absolutely on the verge of decline, and they have to go out if we have to have a meaningful supply chain, efficient, and at the same time really delivering value. You spoke about the partnership and the rise of some of the 3PLs. You spoke especially about new age 3PLs adopting technology. I would just like to say that some of the companies which may be not so prominent as new age also adopt a lot of technology. One of them is what I represent, TVS Supply Chain. We believe in a lot of technology that drives our business. And the tier 2 cities, the availability of warehouses. And since the subject is all on warehousing, that's a very important aspect. We have a group company, TVS Infrastructure and Industrial Parks, which is wholly developing now about 6 million square feet of warehousing only in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. They're not in any of the top-notch cities in India. So there are actions that are being taken, and you have rightly brought that out. And the last bit of how in-city warehouses can develop. Some of the in-city warehouses, real estate is very expensive, and therefore, the amount of money that can be spent for in-city storage, unless we go vertical and unless we go into stories of warehousing, is going to be difficult. So that's one area where companies are working on. And the other area probably where we could possibly work on is how does the delivery mechanisms of, even though we have larger warehouses outside the city limits, but still have a very efficient last mile delivery, which could do away the way. So interesting points you brought about, very, very prudent for the time. And some of the points I'll pick up for further discussion as we go by. But let me move on to the next panelist, Nikhil. Nikhil, you have a lot of experience again in manufacturing sector and in the discrete goods that are being delivered in the first mile as well as in the last mile, as well as in production supply chain as well, because you worked in automotive OEMs, etc. But from a standpoint of warehousing, can you take us through, especially since Vibhav spoke about godowns moving into how the infrastructure has evolved in warehousing in India, and what do you think are still the gaps? What made these changes? What are the gaps? And how do you see as players in the ecosystem we can possibly address these gaps and move forward? Over to you, Nikhil.
Yeah, okay, hi. Hello, everyone. So first thing, am I audible enough? Fine, great. See, I think my experience is quite, in many ways, similar to what Webhub is, because, the environment is more or less similar. So my experience is also from a manufacturing environment. Okay, so many things in common. But what I'll still try to do is not to repeat many things what Webhub said. I'll try to, talk about things which perhaps are a little different basically. So but still a few things will still be common. Okay, now just to get started. So one word which I think the Weber talked was about the go down. Go down used to be the most common, was used to be the lexicon earlier. And it's really fortunate that lexicon has changed and we don't really talk much about go downs and talk about warehousing now. I really recall some around 20 odd years back, and I'm sharing this on a lighter note. So when you used to go to Bhiwandi, you used to really see, hey man, this warehouse, because the ceiling height is less, you don't take it. So you was just looking for a warehouse with a higher ceiling height. Then you started looking for a warehouse which really had less pillars, basically, right? Then you started looking for a warehouse which really had no pillars and also had height. So it's really good that so much has changed, so much has evolved, basically. And, but again, the important point is that while so much has changed, there is still so much more to change. All said and done, we are really at a situation where there is that this 90-10 thing is really applying. While that 10% is really, perhaps masterclass, but that 90% still, and that is creating the huge challenges of last mile delivery and all. Okay, so that's really, I think, one point. See, the other thing which I want to bring, because I've really had this opportunity of working, being in regional roles where I had exposure to, warehousing in other countries and all. Here, I just want to bring out one point that, I try to compare the costs of warehousing, say, what is it in China, what is it in Singapore versus India and all. And I see that there is a price differential. Of course, Singapore is higher, and then China and India, I don't see much difference. But I think the difference should be much higher. The cost structure in India can be better, and I'm talking about this masterclass warehousing basically right now, where I really see that in India today, and there are reasons for that not happening. The volume efficiencies are still to be there. The multi-level warehousing, which you see in other countries, still we have yet to realize that. And then on the locational part also, I think so our locations are such that we add costs to the whole supply chain operations today. I think that's one thing I would say, frankly speaking, if you were to see today Shanghai would compare more or less to Bhiwandi warehousing today, if you really see, basically. I mean, that should not be the case, basically. The difference should be, we should be much more competitive, less expensive, and that will come through efficiencies. So I think that's one area where I feel that our, cost per throughput, perhaps good opportunity to really improve. And I think this is something which perhaps my mind says is related to the talent which is available with our 3PLs and our LSPs. I think we have not been fast enough on that. And that's an area where perhaps, something really is an opportunity that, hey, the 3PLs perhaps have to take this call of attracting good talent, the best talent. And this will pay for itself. Today, we perhaps are somewhere caught in this chicken and egg story, because in India, we have a customer base which really negotiates very hard, which perhaps is still not really able to see the value which can come out by investing in talent. But then, my belief is, and I, frankly speaking, in my experience, I did whatever I could to really say that, hey, you get the best talent, and it's paid for itself. It has really paid for itself, because the productivity comes out, ideas come out, the new idea implementation happens. Basically, these are all things which add value to your bottom line, basically. But here pace of acceleration really needs to happen, and I think organizations like Apollo, Coke, Pepsi, the bigger ones and all, which really have much more scale, demand, they can perhaps lead the way. So that's, I can say that basically, in my experience from 20 odd years with DuPont alone, when I started, we had around 20 odd C&Fs basically. And by the time I left DuPont, we were just with one or two. Because I think consolidation, and every time this led to gains for the company. So I think that's something which we can do. And the other thing which I'm really seeing says in my last 2-3 years experience, that where we see that infrastructure in India has evolved, today, and I'm seeing it in Sakata, where I'm currently, heading the supply chain, is that we are being able to service our customers directly from our plant. So we have a plant, say one in Bhiwadi, which is north, and then one in Panoli. We are able to cater the whole country, and we are able to provide services, say 2 or 3 days, which is fine. So the warehouses which we had across, we've closed them down, and I think it's a good news. It's a good news from a cost perspective that the infrastructure is involved. So I think this is another trend. But then what perhaps why this is something which is, this is again changing the dynamics on the ground. But the other change which has come, which perhaps I'm seeing, and perhaps more of it I foresee in the future, is for the opportunity for 3PLs to get into plant warehousing. Because ultimately, that's a big thing. We may not be warehousing externally, but we have to warehouse internally. We have to warehouse more internally, and that's a big challenge basically. And that's an opportunity, because the experts can really come in over here and do it. A lot of it, of course, happens in the auto sector, basically in the industry. I think this is already moving towards becoming a norm, but not so in other industries like chemicals and other industrial products. But I see that it can move in that direction, basically. Okay, so that's the what I really wanted to see. And the other thing perhaps I really want to say is, again, I'm coming back to the point of talent, basically, right? The talent available with the 3PLs. So we've seen a lot of change happening in the supply chain environments, in the supply chain teams at the corporate level, in the corporation. So much has got outsourced already, basically, and I think that trend will go on, basically. And here a win-win situation is definitely possible, where 3PLs perhaps just from being doing what they are told to do, if this talent thing were really to happen, they can really do a lot of things which a corporate does on their own. That thing of improvement, that thing of really whatever targets which they say, which organization set for themselves, which department set for themselves, they can really get into that shoes. And if that were to happen, it will really create a win-win situation. Corporates would really, they will not really mind that this work also shifting, because the focus of the business always is on the products, is on the markets, is on strategy, and really focusing on the big things, and then passing it on over there. So this is something which should happen, and I see a bit of it already happening. Wherever I work, I've tried to do that, but an opportunity for this part to really get accelerated, basically. And I think this has meaning both for the way warehousing will evolve, and this has meaning for the value propositions coming from the 3PL side. Yeah, this is what I want to share, Shankar.
Thank you, Nikhil. Very interesting. A couple of things that you brought about makes a lot of meaning and sense to us. First, the evolution of infrastructure, but you also said that our costs are higher, and what can we do? And one of the points that you touched upon is, are the 3PLs having the right talent to be able to bring it? We are always faced with this challenging question, which comes from most customers, at least in India. I want world-class quality at Indian prices. And definitely, we have to rise up to delivering that. And the way to deliver that, I would say, is having the right talent, having the right technology, which is going to bring the overall costs down. You also said that automotive industry is far ahead in terms of outsourcing. Like we are the largest in-plant warehousing service provider in the country. If the automotive industry has outsourced 35% of its activity to, if I were to measure on an index in India, other industries will follow suit, and definitely there is a lot of value that can be created in it. And we should not shy away from hiring the best talent. But overall, this is where the collaboration between the 3PL and the service seekers or the customers, whichever industry should come in, where we start looking at total cost and not cost of transaction. What's the value that is going to be delivered by the total cost? And 3PL companies, at least I'm quite confident, are willing to take that punt on, we reduce the overall total cost and then get a gain share, where the skin is in the game, that, instead of just being resource based, okay, this is the rent, this is the manpower cost, this is the overhead, and therefore this is a small margin, to overall you cost in a holistic manner and then get the gain share, that this is how I share and save, and this is how I share the saving with the customer. So that those models need to evolve, and that will happen. We'll pick this up as well as we go by, but let me go to Jeffrey. Interesting points we have discussed. But from your experience of being in Singapore, you would have gone through this learning cycle, and definitely there are a lot that we can learn from what has happened in terms of this development, how you as an organization are enabling technology to bring costs down and to improve productivity, because these are two subjects that we spoke quite a bit in warehousing, and maybe the smart warehousing that you all adopt in a developed market, how that can translate into benefits for our customers in India. Over to you, Jeffrey.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. I guess we heard a lot from the panelists about 3PLs, and the different demands and situations in India and in China, in Singapore. I guess from the organization perspective, we are in all these locations that's being mentioned, and I guess we are taking a different approach to this entire different developmental stage in different countries. Of course, in Singapore, where it's one of the most expensive city to live in, to operate. A lot of the constraints in terms of labor costs, land costs, this is where we are always struggling, to manage, especially in the logistic business. So YCH Group itself, we are both a 3PL in a way, but we are definitely more than a 3PL. At the same time, we also own and develop and build our own warehouses as part of our asset right strategy in our development. Maybe what I could do is, to make this a more fruitful session, I'll use a few slides to maybe just guide those who are participating in this session along, to get a bit more perspective of what we do, and then that would maybe help the participant to enjoy this session a bit more. So as you can see, we serve quite a wide variety of clients in all different spaces. From consumer goods to electronics, all these are Fortune 500 companies, or even they are big multinational companies. And the complexity that we are dealing with is especially very complex, because we are dealing with 150,000 SKU at any point of time, different SKUs. And the responsibility is relatively heavy on the group, as we actually manage USD 55 billion worth of cargo going through our hands in the entire process. Of course, then being a group that has been in the sector for more than 66 years, we have earned various recognition, including recognitions from our customers. So this is where we actually continue to innovate, and in order to serve our customers better. As I mentioned, we are in this region. We are in Greater China, India, and ASEAN, and we are in 100 locations over 16 countries. In India, especially, we are in 39 locations over 32 pan-India cities. We basically have built the first green warehouse in India back in 2010, and that's where we started our journey in India, looking at our network and actually our development. Currently, we are located in Singapore. We are at Supply Chain City. For those who have not been in Singapore or at Supply Chain City, of course, now with the pandemic, I believe many of you couldn't travel. But welcome to visit us. Supply Chain City is where it's located at the west of Singapore, in the Jurong Innovation District, where a lot of the new technologies, including smart logistics, advanced manufacturing, urban logistics, robotics will be piloted. And this is where all the innovations will actually take place. As mentioned, as 3PL, or as today we call ourselves the 7PL, we don't just do the traditional warehouse, or I believe in India, a lot of the discussion was on the go down. I believe warehouses today are built with the capability, with the ability to innovate and to scale. We have various types of warehouse. Not every warehouse that we own are in this state that you see, as we have indicated on this slide, where many different technologies, including AGVs, automated storage retrieval system, drones that we have doing the warehouse for autonomous inventory management, for stock cycle counting, and as we have the e-commerce fulfillment hub here in the Supply Chain City, we actually also use autonomous mobile robots, or in some common context, we call it the shelf or goods to man, kind of operation. We have 120 docks for cargoes to be docked. We actually deployed a dock management system to schedule. We operate this in a very efficient manner, or say infinite possibility, where we actually pilot a lot of these new solutions in the warehouse itself. Of course, as different countries, are in different stage of development, India, China, labor cost consideration, land cost consideration, construction cost consideration. Not every warehouse will deploy as much as that sophisticated technology, and also trying to minimize the use of land space. As we develop warehouses in the region, we look at a more efficient way to deploy smart technologies like this to really help to solve some of the key issues, which I believe was mentioned, including labor. Singapore is a small country. We have been, require a lot of foreign labor, foreign talent coming into the country itself. But as the pandemic hits, most of us realize that talents from overseas may not be readily available or so easily imported. And we are very fortunate to say that, as we have deployed this technology in where we are running AGVs, for forklifts, automated storage retrieval system, the demand for foreign labor or labor-intensive jobs in the warehouse has much been eased, in the entire process. As we face a labor crunch in today's pandemic world, we are experiencing a less challenging problem than many of those traditional warehouse operators that operate their warehouse based on intensive labor and manpower, driving forklifts, moving cargoes. So this is where we have added advantage as we progress, into the other countries outside of Singapore. We've been in India since 2009, if I remember correctly, and we have been expanding our network in India. We hope that we could bring such technology, such efficient technology, including our platforms, our solution, where we have our own proprietary warehouse management solution, our own transport management solution that will help to manage the last mile the transport operations, including our order management system that we have put in place to manage fulfillment for the e-commerce industry, which I think that's something that's booming in India. At the same time, in this space, we also piloted a fully automated cold chain storage system with 20,000 pallet position, where we actually store frozen vegetables as part of our commitment to the nation in terms of doing this. And at the same time, the 5-story ramp-up warehouse together with the ASRS created an entire fusion between the rack and stack, the traditional warehouses, and the automated storage retrieval system in a seamlessly integrated manner, where every story is integrated with the traditional warehouse with the automated storage retrieval system through a conveyor belt system, where every hour we can handle up to 450 pallets going in and out of the entire system seamlessly flowing through. So this is technology where we have deployed, and we hope to bring this to India, to China, to the rest of the other countries that we actually operate. And besides that, as mentioned, we actually built the first green warehouse in India, and we own that asset until today in Chennai, where we are serving BMIs of the large electronics manufacturers. As we build every single facility, we are actually championing the green and sustainability, mission, as a responsible corporate citizen. responsible to the world, responsible to this environment. You know, we actually, every infrastructure that we build is actually certified with some sort of green mark certification. In Singapore, we have the Building and Construction Authority green mark certification. We also have the LEED Platinum, the green mark Platinum certification for most of our infrastructure. Today in Singapore, our latest facility, Supply Chain City, is actually powered by solar energy. And this is in collaboration with one of our Singapore company called Sembcorp. And the entire solar energy that we have on the warehouse rooftop with solar panels actually supply more than 50% of our energy consumption needs. And moving forward, this is the strategy and the direction that the group will take for every warehouse or every infrastructure that we build as part of our contribution to save the environment and save the world in terms of carbon footprint. And we are going towards that zero carbon footprint direction, and also using renewable energy as part of our commitment to these environmental efforts. At the same time, I believe one of the panelists actually mentioned about training, you know, the talent. This is something that we do, and it's something in our blood. The organization has a culture of teaching, rather giving the man a fish, we rather teach a man how to fish. And in the entire supply chain city that we have here, besides the state-of-the-art technology that you see, what we are trying to do is also putting in place a learn ecosystem. This learn ecosystem is a system that we put in that everybody will come into supply chain city, you know, where you could work, learn, and live, you know, and then at the same time capture the knowledge, you know, from the industry itself. As the L represents the living supply chain where operators like YCH and our customers, you know, operate and run supply chain in supply chain city itself. And at the same time, E, which is the experiential workplace learning, we actually started our own academy called the Supply Chain and Logistics Academy for the industry, where it trains the industry, even our competitors, our partners, our customers, you know, in a professional conversion program that we will help to lift up, you know, managers, professionals in the 3PL space, the logistic and supply chain space, where they'll be graduating after 18 months of training, you know, with a certificate. And new technologies like data science, like, you know, AR, VR, blockchain will be actually imparted to these professionals, where they know that these are the emerging technologies that will be changing the industry, the skill sets. They even learn how to fly drones in the academy itself, so that drones can be deployed as part of the technology that they'll be using. So we are actively training our people, our 3PLs, our operators, and not only in Singapore, but we're also moving the academy to other countries, in countries like Vietnam, China, even India, as we have progressed, you know, as we are progressing into the India expansion. We try to create what we call the Asia network of supply chain thought leaders by having our own community called the Supply Chain Asia with 30,000 corporate members. And also our ASEAN CSR and our ASEAN Applied Research Center is hosted here in Supply Chain City, where we try to bring the knowledge across the entire industry, the top leadership in this sector, to the rest of the other industry. We're also trying to put in technology with Reinventing Tomorrow with our own affiliated IT arm, Y3 Technologies, that builds our proprietary warehouse management system and our transport management system, together with our subsidiary company that goes into the CRM and loyalty space with the B2C engagement. In today's context, we are also doing e-commerce enabler through our YSG platform, where we're helping our customer to sell through the B2C channel. We are also doing live streaming here as part of the technology that we are deploying. And last but not least, we never forget the startups, you know, the startup ecosystem, where we actually have the nurturing disruptive innovators with our Supply Chain Angel, a corporate venture arm that we actually partner with the National Research Foundation of Singapore under the Prime Minister's Office to start a $20 million dollar funding for startups in the space of supply chain and logistics. We are trying to create this ecosystem that will continue to grow, you know, and then continue to accelerate the skills, you know, and the knowledge that we have in this industry, besides just the technology itself that we are deploying. So with all this effort that we're doing, we're looking at in India, places where there are need for such technology, including places in cold chain, in e-commerce, you know, better grade warehouse, the A grade warehouse that are developing, and trying to use this, you know, ecosystem that we could propagate into India, building more infrastructures as we operate and run our operations in India. So I'll stop here, where I'll share. Hope that you get more bit of insights of what we're doing here in Singapore. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeffrey. That was really interesting, especially what you spoke on automation in warehousing, whether it's the area of automated storage retrieval systems, AGVs, AMR, dock management systems, and automated inventory management. Another very interesting point and a very pertinent point is the whole area of learning and development and talent. It's not important just to acquire talent. It's not just important to pay talent, but how do we continuously ensure their learning and growth, and how do they become better? And with newer areas of operation coming in and newer areas of technology enabling businesses, that's the second important point and a very pertinent point for warehousing competitors we spoke about. And the last but not the least is how do we collaborate with the startup ecosystem, and how you as an organization is even in funding them to ensure that the best of the ideas get into what we want to deliver to the customer. Gone are the days when each organization thinks that it's competitive advantage, so they have to do everything themselves. From the point of view of these end customers, they are outsourcing to 3PLs, but 3PLs also need to work with the entire ecosystem to kind of make platforms and networks of collaboration which will actually deliver value to the customers, and that's a win-win game for everyone. So interesting points, surely very, very thought-provoking, and a lot for us to learn in India, adopt it and move forward. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. We'll have one more couple of questions that I have, which I'll ask some of the panelists, and then I'm conscious of the time as well. Then we'll go into opening up the questions for audience, and I'm sure they'll have a lot of interesting questions to ask. Rahul, to you, the next question. We're living in after the second wave of pandemic in India. In many countries, the third wave is coming, and there are variants. And in India also, it's predicted that there is likely to be a third wave. I pray to God it doesn't happen. But given your experience and managing a perishable commodity and being in the cold supply chain, how did you, especially in countries where there were severe lockdowns, India being one of them, how did you manage the pandemic situation in ensuring that an essential commodity like yours reaches the consumer? And what are the learnings that you have? And how is it that if at all such a thing happens tomorrow, how can supply chains be resilient to this and manage it effectively? Over to you, Rahul.
Sure. No, I think obviously it has been a challenge, but the good part, at least, I came to Shanghai back from India March 2020, and China came out of that pandemic much earlier, than rest of the country. But although the country was open, the amount of restrictions or regulations that have been put in, especially around the food products which were imported in China, were pretty high. 2020, we couldn't actually respond to it except for switching from more container shipping to a dedicated charter shipping. So like what we call, it's almost like a taxi which leaves from New Zealand and comes to Shanghai. That way you have a control on your product. You don't interact with any other category or people outside of your industry. So that way the risk of COVID is limited. We have concentrated our operation to a dedicated charter port in Shanghai. That means, again, you're trying to restrict your exposure in any ways possible. So that was second big thing. It obviously costed us much, now that we switched from a public bus to a taxi. But I think from an overall business perspective, that actually helped us. This year, as we reflected in 2020, I think the 6 key initiatives that we prepared, as a part of the contingency plan. One initiative was working with the 3PLs to make sure that the commodities which have, at least, the test that China does in the market, are prone to COVID, like, the fish, the salmons, are not stored or at least separated, from their perspective. It took them like almost, I think, 6 months to work out with various customers so that some cold chain facility will have a high risk imported meat, and the other facilities where we will concentrate, let's say, the low risk countries like New Zealand. So that was the first initiative in terms of working with 3PL to restructure what we store. The second one, we had planned 3 backup facilities. So typically, like it works in US, if you have 3 locations in China, you can pretty much cover the most of the market. But we have worked with them to figure out 3 alternate facilities just to mitigate the risk that if something happens and the facility is locked, we are able to continue the business from the other facility. So that was the second one. Third one, which is, like I said, we used to do like 7 charters. This year we are doing 25 charters, right? So pretty much the entire annual business is going to be transported by charter. The fourth one is this year we actually started working on expanding the port network, because what we have seen, cases in some of the northern cities, where if one port gets blocked, pretty much the operation, it takes that port 3 to 4 weeks, before it can come back to normal port. And we have seen that happening in 2 of our ports. So we started expanding the port options for us, and that's a long process given the commodity, the specialization that customs need, from inspection perspective as well. So that's the initiative we started, which will, materialize, in next 1 or 2 years. And the last one, I think it was very important for us to kind of deepen the relationship even more with the government labs which are doing the testing, with the customs inspection bodies, so that they understand the risk profile of the commodity. So we worked with the New Zealand ministry, what they call MPI, the primary industry, to kind of make a presentation on what efforts the industry is taking, what efforts the government is taking, and basically walking those initiatives with the counterparts in China to say this is what it is, just trying to differentiate the low risk nature of New Zealand compared to the other commodities that they are having. So I think those are the few initiatives that has helped us. Especially like this year, we just finished a customer meeting that we are the only commodity which managed to continue the supply, in a world where a lot of things are disrupted now. And that obviously created a lot more value because the pricing goes up because you are able to supply. And obviously the customers' comfort working with you, goes high. So yeah, so I think that's the summary of few initiatives that we took in 2021.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you for sharing your knowledge in this area. I mean, very, very thoughtful of the 6 initiatives which you are taking right now as well, which is going to protect your supply chain from getting disrupted, because that's one important aspect. Keeping cognizance of the time, it's time to open up questions to the audience. And those of you who have questions, please put it in the chat box. If you want the question to be answered by a specific panelist, please specify the name of the panelist so that the question can be directed to him. And there is one question that already I see. The question is from Mr. Vinayak. He's talking about while we talk much about capacity building, technology, how would you see the need for human efficiency requirement to get ownership, productivity, and professionalism in handling cargo by 3PL companies? So he's talking about while technology is one part of it, capacity is another part of it, there is the efficiency improvement that needs to come from the operations, primarily by people. He's asking about how that's going to get increased by the 3PL companies. So who would like to take this question? Anybody wants to go ahead for it, please do.
I'll take that.
3PL question. So Jeffrey, what about you? Would you like to take this? How productivity increases can happen?
Yeah, maybe after that, the market can chip in. So for us, of course, besides technology, besides the capacity building, equipping the people with the right skill set and knowledge, what we do is that the other thing that we look very much into is in the area of professional certifications, or what we call the industrial certifications in handling of cargo. So that's what we try to ensure, that from the very basic pharmaceutical products, food products, and the way we do our operations are all being certified by different bodies to ensure that efficiency and the professionalism in handling those cargo as responsibility on us. We need to be giving the customer the assurance in that entire process. Very much of that is one aspect of it in terms of getting that international qualification to deal with certain type of special cargo or certain category of cargo. Technology is guiding us, definitely. It's an enabler, but it's not everything. What we're trying to do is to have that operation excellence, or business process excellence being captured, in our own corporate arm here. And that goes at the global operation implementation across all the different operations that we are doing. At the same time, the system that we are putting in is guiding the people, is in a way monitoring, guiding, the entire process to make sure that everything is from end to end is being captured, is from end to end is being handled, nothing is slip off, and there will be alerts, escalation systems that we will put in place in that entire process. One of the very critical operations that we're doing in these times, or even before the COVID, was the distribution of vaccines. So vaccines, as you know, are one of the very temperature sensitive type of operations that you're dealing with. We are doing the school vaccines before the COVID, and during this pandemic period, we are actually doing the COVID-19 vaccine last mile. So we put in an entire system that has the IoT capability to monitor the temperature in boxes, the cold boxes that we move. At the same time, having our own cold chain control tower that actually monitors the entire operations island-wide. At the same time, providing the escalation alert mechanism where we actually will pick up temperature fluctuations that were beyond the limits, as part of the operation as we do the delivery, to ensure that the vaccines that is being distributed are effective, at the end where it's being injected into, every single individual. So this is how we practice in terms of our guiding principle to ensure that the entire handling of any cargo is in a professional and international certified manner. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey. The next question is a very specific question on some space requirement by Apollo Tyres. I'll just pass on the question separately to Vibhav. They just want to know whether you have requirement of space. But moving on to the next question, that's from Paritosh Yate. The concept of 3PL is mostly being adopted by major manufacturers in India. How is the 3PL sector going to evolve? And what will be the contribution of 3PL in the coming 10 years? Maybe Nikhil, can you take this question, if it's okay with you? On the direction of how 3PL will emerge in India.
Sure. I think, yeah, Shankar, let me give my thoughts on that. See, 3PL has been evolving, as we've all agreed, basically, right? It has evolved so much, wherein from a quality perspective, from a services integration perspective, it has. So just an example, earlier the 3PL who was providing warehousing services so it got evolved to the 3PL providing both warehousing and transportation services. So that has become common, right? Both providing warehousing and transportation services. And now what I am at least driving, I can say for myself, what I'm trying to drive is that, and I've seen it working at many places, is really moving from 3PL to 4PL, but without undermining the capability which the 3PLs bring in. So, and herein, this is what I really, the nuance in it basically, right? That you bring in a 4PL concept wherein, basically the efficiencies and the and the leveragings basically which are possible come through. So for example, as I said, warehousing, transportation is one thing. Now, in a business, apart from warehousing and transportation, you invariably also have import and export, basically, right? And there is a common thing between import export services and warehousing transportation services. You always have to move containers from your factory to the plant and vice versa. So there is an integration over there, and a common player who is really overseeing the whole flow of goods right from your plant all the way to your customers requires different capabilities. They may not all be together in one player, but if it's there in one player, great, but it may be there in one organization, but they will be in different teams. How you are bringing together, basically. So more and more of this type has to happen. And then the other part of 3PL development is really very important, is the capability to handle data. One is you have to be able to put the data together and what you do with that data. So that's where this technology angle really comes in, because we have really been talking a lot on technology, but how much utilization we have been able to do of that data, I think there is still a huge gap. And that's a demand which has to keep built, which will really come in the future, which is, I'm really seeing it already happening, but what will really accelerate ability to crunch data, basically, right? Because ultimately this thing called real-time demand sensing and all that stuff will only be possible. This thing of becoming a more agile supply chain will only happen when we are able to process that data, basically convert that data into information, basically. And I think that's something which the 3PLs really have to brace themselves up for. So this 3PLs perhaps have to start thinking of themselves as 4PL. I was hearing a word somewhere, 5PL, 6PL, and all that stuff, basically, how you are really able to bring information together, basically, right? And I really see that being the pattern and perhaps the norms in years to come.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you very much, Nikhil, for that insight. My own 2 cents on this subject is that, if you look at logistics spend in the country, it should be anywhere between $180 billion to 200, 220, depending upon what you include in it or what you don't include in it. Formal organized 3PL is just about $7 or $8 billion. So there's a tremendous scope for organized 3PL to come in. And the largest component of logistics spend in the country is agriculture, where there is very minimal 3PL or really 3PL that is available. So there's plenty of scope that's there, and I think all the business models that you spoke about, how do we deliver end-to-end services, how do we go up and look at knowledge services, which is whether 4PL or whatever it is, kind of look at problems, solve problems, and then operate it somewhere in the realm of how do we collaborate with consulting companies like EY and also consulting services which formal 3PL, 4PL organizations themselves do. And that's something that is what I see as evolution in the next 10 years. Definitely exciting times in India. The next question is from Harsha. He's talking about logistics sector, the use of robotics in warehousing. Is there a scope? Is it already being used? And of course, Jeffrey Tan did speak about quite a lot about AGVs and ASRS, etc. But the specific question is on robots. So who would like to go for this question? Anybody interested? Yeah.
If you want, I can take it. Yeah.
Or... Sure. Oh, okay.
Okay. Maybe I'll take that question in short and let other panelists have that their views on this. So for robotics adoption, predominantly there are many forms. It comes in very many forms, and there are many options and solutions out there available by different vendors. We have the very expensive European, and the US suppliers. We also have the Chinese suppliers that are in this business, and I've seen a lot of them. But most of the time, it has to cater for a specific business purpose. When we're doing the B2B business, we actually look at the autonomous forklift, the automated guided vehicle, the forklifts, the automated storage retrieval system, the drones, And we also have looked at robotic hands in terms of some of the picking operations, as part of that deployment. But of course, then it has to fit in terms of the entire business value proposition and also the cost effectiveness of deploying these robots. Then when we go to the e-commerce operations and the fulfillment of the e-commerce operations, we then look at the AMRs, the autonomous mobile robots, which actually brings the shelf to man in a more effective, efficient picking manner. So this is where we need to be specific in terms of looking at certain robotic solution. It is really happening. You might be very surprised if you go to warehouses, in China, where you see all the no-man type operations. In the West, it's also already happening. Some of the warehouses are already deploying fully automated robot operations, especially when it comes to like grocery, e-commerce, type of operations. So it's happening. It's just that you have to choose and pick your solution. Look at a partnership with the other vendors, where you could go a bit longer. Like for example, we have partnered one of the vendors with the autonomous mobile robots deployment. We are also their partner in this region for as a reseller, as part of that partnership, and created the Global Innovation Center here in the region, hosted in Supply Chain City. So this is what you could do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, while we wait for, we actually, I have just last month visited the fully automated warehouse from Jingdong, the JD.com. It's very close to Shanghai, and it's not like as a technology trial. I think people are realizing that the workforce is the labor situation is not as easy. Finding people to work. It's not a very fancy industry, let's say. So getting people to work on it, is challenging, and people realize that this is a much longer horizon to transition. You can only offer that services right now with only limited sectors. E-commerce is a good example, and that too in a category which is less than 5 kg, where the complete automation is possible. But anything more than 5 kg, you have to have a manual intervention. Yeah. Okay, Shankar, I just commenting on the warehouse, the fully automated warehouse that I have seen. And the scale is amazing. Just to give the numbers, which I was, it can process like 2.3 million parcels in a day. Almost 500,000 orders. 300 AGVs just moving, in the warehouse and bringing the stuff. But as I said, it is only limited to the parcels with less than 5 kg. Anything more than that, fully automation is still not there.
Yeah, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I have a little bit bad connectivity, so I am just not on video. I think we are on time to close. I don't have time for asking all the panelists for the closing remarks. We are already 3 minutes past the time given to us. Thank you very much, all of the panelists, for joining in. I'm sure the audience found it quite useful. Very rich and enriching discussions took place on the warehousing competitiveness. I'm sure this is exciting times for India, given that we are just getting out of pandemic. What everybody says is we need to forget whatever we are doing and a new way of working, new way of doing things. I'm sure this knowledge that was shared by all the panelists today and the participants will gain from it. As an organization, as the entire partners in this ecosystem, we will work together in ensuring that in the next 5 to 10 years time frame, India will be a very different place from a supply chain standpoint and from a standpoint of warehousing competitiveness, and we will be able to realize the goals that has been set by the government of India for us to bring the overall logistics cost down, and with the economy going away from the current 2.5 to 2.7 trillion to 5 trillion. This is exciting times for all professionals in this field. Thank you very much. And I think it's now lunchtime, and after that, the next session is likely to start at 2 p.m. 2 p.m. Thank you very much. And I enjoyed the session as much as all of you did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shankar. Thank you, everyone. Nice connecting with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.